Welcome back, listeners, to the podcast of Three Men for Thee in the realm of politics, prophecy, and the supernatural. And if you did not see our last podcast, you need to go back and look at that. We interviewed a man who has some kind of connection with a book called Chicken Soup for the Soul. So we interviewed Mark Victor Hansen. And then our podcast before that, we interviewed some guy who is an actor, and you might know him as Hercules. So we interviewed Kevin Sarbo before that. And so we've got a lot of energy going in our podcast today. And we're going to be talking about somebody that's involved with energy with something that's called Energize Ministry. And we're so happy to have Andy Bowersox with us today, who is the founder of Energize Ministry. So, Jack, you want to start us off with the conversation?
Sure. Well, we want to welcome you, Andy, and thank you for giving us some time today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad
Okay,
to be here with you guys.
great. We are always blessed by the stories of how people come to Christ. To see how God reaches out to everyone, and I mean everyone in the world, gets some light. And how they respond to that light depends on how much more light they get and so forth. So, Andy, how in the world did you come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ?
Well, that's the easy part. March 24th, 1976. I was 5 years old, beside my parents' bed with my mother, and it was just time. So I remember the day, the date, and the scenario right at it.
Amen. Well, that's a great way to do it, to have your parents involved and be right there with you. That's fantastic. So we appreciate you sharing that with us. We hear some amazing stories of how the Lord has reached out in his mercy and his grace and has gotten the word and how people respond to the light. Sometimes when you're out there, well, I know when I'm out there and I'm talking to people and I'm trying to witness, and sometimes I can get discouraged. But all I need to hear is how Andy Bowersox or how Carl Martin or how Herb Burns or how any of us comes to Christ. And it really, really encourages me. So thank you. And I hope that that message, and I know it will encourage our listeners. Carl?
Andy, it says on your profile that you're an encourager, and I want you to know we need more of them.
Amen.
And it says that your mission is pastoral care. So, my first question to you, Andy, since you're also a junkie for adventure, is what has been one of your most rewarding adventures?
Most rewarding adventures?
Rewarding, yeah.
Rewarding in a spiritual sense, or just rewarding as in the fun factor?
Whatever way you want to go.
Well, you're catching me at a good time because I just came back from a snowmobiling trip in the upper part of Michigan. And honestly, I've been doing those trips for probably 15 years. Um, I look forward to it from the day I get back until the day I get to go again the next year. And it seems crazy because it's freezing cold weather and it's gray skies, there's no sunshine. But I go with a group of other believers, and it's the fellowship is good. We drive up there, so it's 18 hours in the car. We get to, just catch up some of the guys I don't see for the whole year in between. But that's an adventure that I very much enjoy, the camaraderie as much as the high speed and adrenaline rush of racing each other through the woods too.
Now, during any of those adventures of yours in the past, have any of them ever brought any danger to you? Have you ever been in one of those precarious situations where you think, "Oh my
I
goodness,
was
what am I doing here?"
so look, you guys don't know me, right? So we're getting to know each other here, but Carl, I will parlay this into how our ministry got started in just a second, just to help you bridge there. But you know, Jack, you mentioned it earlier too. God creates all of us with unique skills, abilities, talents, and passions, right? And so I'm now 15 years into a full-time ministry of providing refreshment, recreational retreats, and encouragement, as you said, to pastors. Um, To answer your very first question, the dangerous part, yes. The snowmobiling of all the stuff that I like to do, that's probably the most dangerous. But just to give you what we're comparing that to, this past summer, Herb, you may remember this. I took a jet ski trip from Miami across the ocean over to the Bahamas with another couple buddies. The year before that, I took a motorcycle trip across the country of Ecuador with a high school buddy. So, like, my level of adventure is probably higher than the norm. But I tell you that now because go back to, Jack, you asked me when I became a Christian. I told you I was 5 years old, right? And so by the grace of God, my parents were believers, spent a lot of sacrifice to send myself and my younger brothers to a Christian education. Unfortunately, I squandered a lot of that education, and it wasn't for any real bad reasons. It was because I wanted to go hang out with my buddies. And I tell people, my parents, they sent us to a very good private, like a prep school, a high school, and it was a Christian place. And so while my trouble wasn't in doing things bad, it was in skipping a lot of school. And because, like I said, I'd go hang out with my buddies, and I actually skipped so much school that I had to go summertime tutoring in order to get my credits to graduate. Much to the chagrin of my parents, I didn't want to go any further than that with other education, and so I started a business. For a long period of time, God was very abundant in what we would think of typical blessings in that business and in others. But the idea of just being the fun-loving guy and hanging out with my buddies way back in junior high and high school comes all the way up to the beginning of 2000, the end of 2009, beginning of 2010. And if you guys are watching this, you see this lady that's sitting back here behind me. Her name's Cindy Annan. She works in the office here with us, but her husband was a good friend of mine, and he was a children's pastor at my home church. Cindy and her husband Dave had 7 kids, 6 girls. They had one teenage son, and didn't get to do a whole lot of what I would say guy type adventure stuff all the time. So there was one day that I just invited Dave and his son to come over, and we were going to ride some ATVs. And Herb, I don't know if you've ever even heard all this story,
No,
but
I haven't. But you really have kind of led into my question I was going to ask you. When did the pendulum swing that made you start into this energized
okay.
ministry?
All right. Well, if
Yeah,
you don't mind this little monologue
yeah.
story, well, one thing that we're good at our ministry is telling stories. So here, early the end of 2009, early 2010, I just invited Dave to come over, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to take my kids. Why don't you bring your son? We're just going to ride some ATVs around. We have a small farm property not too far from here in North Carolina, and we've spent probably just 4 or 5 hours together, just goofing around. Made some hot dogs over a fire, sat around. At the end of the day, Dave, I describe it as Dave being overly grateful for that just recreation time. And it wasn't, I didn't call him because I was worried about marriage stress. I wasn't worried about my kids getting into anything. Like, there was no hidden agenda. It was just, hey, come hang out with us and let's have some fun. And it happened to be at a pretty monumental moment in his life where he just needed what we now call unencumbered recreation time. So he kept calling and he kept thanking me for it. And I'm like, no problem, come back anytime. And one day he finally said, Andy, he said, I really feel like it's more than that. I believe the Lord wants me to help you start a ministry to do what you do for other pastors. And I remember thinking, well, what is it I do exactly? Like, I'm just out here screwing around having some fun. And he said, I don't know, but will you start praying about it with me, and let's just see what happens. Well, you three guys and whoever's listening, I can tell you beyond the shadow of a doubt, when we started praying about what does it mean to provide just recreation and fun and refreshment time for pastors, I more than anything in my life, I absolutely knew this is what God was asking me to do. Now, you think that sounds like much of a ministry? I'm going to go hang out with these pastors and we're going to take them to do fun stuff. Everybody in my life, and I mean everybody, looked at me like I had three heads when I came back with this idea. And honestly, like I don't blame them. I felt crazy at the time because it doesn't like first of all, there wasn't any income to come with it. And married, had three kids. My wife wasn't happy about the scenario, but
What
it
were you
was
doing at
just
that time? What was your work?
I at that time I was in the construction development business.
Okay.
And the Lord did some really crazy stuff, sort of took all that away, brought this to the forefront. And I trust me when I tell you, we don't have enough time to cover all the details of how he worked that out. But it was crystal clear that this is one of my natural talents is to have fun and encourage other people to have fun. And for whatever reason, God was asking me to do that with pastors. I didn't understand why. I thought I was just as crazy as all my buddies thought I was, but it was an inescapable sensation is the best word I can tell you, right? And so I just started hanging out with these pastors, and from the very beginning, our ministry actually used to be called day retreats because we provided these 1 day retreats. Now, if you know, Carl, you looked at our website apparently somewhere in there, and you realize now we serve pastors all over the country. We still provide retreats. We have an amazing retreat center up in the southern part of Virginia. But the grander purpose of our ministry has really become more, I would call it an advocacy, and I believe with all my heart that God has called us to raise an entire army of believers that are committed to reinvesting in the lives of their pastors and their families.
Are y'all doing anything in Florida?
Well, we do stuff all over. We do a lot of work through Christian radio. We do some pastor appreciation events there. But the reason I'm telling you is that I believe that God's called us to raise this army of believers is because in any given church in America, and you guys know this if you've been in any kind around any kind of ministry, there's always way more criticism than there is encouragement. Psychologists will tell you it takes 7 compliments to overcome the effects of 1 criticism. Look, guys, I spend my whole life trying to be an encouragement to pastors, and I can find something wrong. I can be the armchair quarterback and complain about something going on just as much as the next guy. But all that stuff, like it wears on our pastors. And, you know, again, I know you interview people all the time. You hear leaders that will tell you, you know, leadership always brings out the criticism in other people. That's part of being a leader. But when you lead people in the spiritual realm, it brings an all-out attack. And we say it like this: if you're introducing people to Christ, if you're helping them grow closer to the Lord, you can rest assured that the enemy is right there combating, fighting against that at an almost equal level. And it's hard, it's messy. Most people look at their pastors as preaching from 9 to 12 on Sunday, don't understand what spiritual warfare really looks like in their home, in their lives. So that's become part of our job, is to help educate, engage, and equip parishioners at large on how we can be reinvesting and refilling the pictures of our pastors' lives. That was a mouthful I gave you there, I know, but that's the gist of
great.
what's going on.
Oh,
Hey,
that's
Jack.
great. Yeah, no, that's super. As our tagline says, we focus on politics, prophecy, and the supernatural. So, can you give us something that maybe, you know, the Apostle Paul tells us in the New Testament that some have entertained angels unaware. Have you had any kind of an incident like that, hanging around the pastors that you do, doing the work that you do? Have you ever had something that you just said, wait a minute now, was that some help direct from the Lord, and maybe there was some angelic intervention there?
So I wish I could take this camera around the corner over here. We have a wall on the back side of this where this door is, and it's painted in chalkboard paint, and we call it the God Wall. And it is filled. It's literally entirely filled up. There's not room to write one more thing on there.
Okay,
But
stop just a minute.
yeah,
Take a picture of it, email it to me, and I'll put it into this video clip.
Cindy, can you do that real quick?
Yeah.
Um,
When I post
send
it,
it
I'll
over
put
there.
that image in there.
Okay, all right, well, that'll be great. So, and I'll tell you something you can see. All right, so like Jack, again, there's a story to your answer. All right, but let me just. This is a little unprofessional, but let me just show you something right here. So can you see that shield right there on that door?
Yes, yes.
The shield there, and right below it is a sword hanging
Sword,
down.
yeah.
Sword, yes.
The
Okay.
forge.
All right. This is how the God Wall got started. Herb, you may have to edit part of this thing going here, but so that sword and shield came after we hosted a citywide prayer event. We're in Winston-Salem, that's where our headquarters is. We hosted a citywide prayer event to pray for spiritual leadership, not just in our churches with pastors and their families, but in our homes, in our school system, in our government. It was an amazing experience. What happened right after that was probably some of the darkest periods of my life as a Christian. It was a dark period in our ministry, and I was mad about it. And I remember storming around in this office, and I was like, God, we are supposed to be children of the King of Kings. We should not have to put up with this. And so there was another girl in here that was helping me at the time. And I said, I want some kind of visible reminder that we are in a battlefield all the time, right? Like you see great things happen and the enemy's right there to destroy it, bring it down. And I mean in some really, really nasty ways. So this is probably it was 2016, so it was before Facebook Marketplace. If any of your viewers know about Facebook Marketplace, this is like Craigslist days, right? So I said, today I want a reminder. I want a sword and a shield, and I want it hanging on this door by the end of the day today. Well, this girl couldn't. She found the sword right away. Went bought it somewhere on Craigslist, but we couldn't find a shield. And right next door to us is a self-storage facility. So we didn't get it that day, but the next day there was a guy that came into the self-storage facility there, and he had his key stuck in the lock or something. And so the girl over there asked me if I could come help him get his key out of the lock. I said, sure, no problem. So as I'm walking over there, I said, hey, what does this guy do for a living? Like, I need something to talk to him about. And she started smiling and she said, I think he does something with Renaissance fairs. So I'm like, how much you want to bet he's got a shield down there? So anyway, as I'm walking down there, I said, hey, that girl said that you do something with Renaissance fairs. Do you happen to have an old like medieval style shield or something? He's like, oh, I got one right here in this storage unit. So I come back up the hill carrying this shield. And what the reason I'm telling you that is because I wanted that day a reminder of the battle, right? A sword and a shield. We looked all over the place, couldn't find one. Here there's one in a self-storage unit, 100 yards from our office, just waiting. And I said to the guy, I said, hey, can we buy it from you? And he asked what we wanted for. I told him, he said, I'll just give it to you. So as I came back in there, I'm like, this is a God moment right here, right? Like he provided this, he knew it was coming. And I said, I want to start recording these things that we can't really explain any other way other than seeing the fingerprints and the breath of God like show up. So we did. We started writing stuff on there, and when Herb, you get the picture, you'll see stuff on there that doesn't make any sense to anybody else, right? There's one that just says tires, and there's another one that says street sign, and a lot of them are provision, ways that God provides money for us to keep doing what we do. I will give you a little side note, Jack, in your supernatural thing. We've been doing this full time for 15 years. In 15 years, we've never charged one penny for anything that we offer, and we've never done any fundraising. We simply pray that God will provide for the needs of this ministry. And a lot of that stuff, like people think we're crazy about that way, but I believe that he's called us to really model. If you know the story about George Mueller, he's sort of called us to model after that approach, and he's called us to it. He's promised to provide for it, so we pray that he does. So a lot of
Amen.
those things are provision on that when you see the picture, Herb. But yeah, on another podcast, Jack, we'll go through story by story, and I can tell you over and over the miraculous ways that he's provided for our needs. I tell you that because I absolutely believe that God cares for his servants, the pastors and people that have made sacrifices to serve him. For some reason, he chooses to provide a lot of that care through our ministry.
Amen. That's great. Carl?
All right, Andy, what are some of the challenges then that your ministry faces?
How long do we have to talk about that?
We've got about 10 minutes.
Um, so I'll put it in the same category. Provision is always a challenge for us. Um, I'm the director of this ministry. There's about 8 or 10 of us that work in some form or fashion. I generally believe, I shouldn't say I believe, I generally feel with all my heart that we're never going to make it to the next day because it's hard, right? It's hard to make plans. It's hard to everything we do is expensive. We have a 700-acre retreat center in the southern part of Virginia that is exclusively dedicated to what we call kingdom leadership
Oh,
retreats
it's
and
beautiful.
refreshments,
Yeah, beautiful.
predominantly pastors and their families. It costs a lot of money to keep that place up. We partner with Christian radio all over the country to help grow this audience and encourage people to be caring for their pastor. It's all expensive. And yet I believe with all my heart that God's called us only to pray. It's his, we've got all these old cliches, right? Where it's his will, it's his bill, and he gives the vision, gives the provision. We know all those cliches. It comes down to obedience on our part. Are we willing to be courageous, to risk it all, to do what he's called us to, and count on him to provide for it? And so I would say, as exciting when we look at that wall that you can't see at the moment,
I sent it.
is
Email.
okay. By the way, Herb, she sent it to you, so you should have it.
Okay.
While that's so exciting, it's also extremely difficult. And so we do a lot of praying, but you all know we serve a very faithful God. The other side of it, I guess, outside the provision part, I wish we were better at all the things that we do, right? I wish I was a better leader. I wish we were more efficient in the scripts that we come up with for our radio programs. I wish the quality, I'm a believer that God deserves our best, and I wish the quality of some of go down the line, right? The content that we put, I wish it was better. But we do the best we can with what we have to work with, and we count on God to fill in all the other gaps.
So, Andy, what do you want our readers, our listeners, to pray about or pray for you or somehow or another minister to you? What do you
Yeah.
want us to do?
So a couple things. First of all, be in prayer for their pastors and their families. Um, I'll tell you just a pretty quick story, I guess. I mentioned Cindy that you see sitting back here. Her husband, he passed away several years ago now from cancer. But a big part of the reason that I sort of took a liking to him and an interest in him is before they came to our church, they were pastoring at another church up in Pennsylvania, and it was sort of a rural part of Pennsylvania, one of these very traditional churches that has pews on the center aisle and piano and an organ and Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night services. And Dave and Cindy with their whole family basically expected to be in the front row, all those girls that had dresses on down to their ankles, and they were all under the microscope. Well, they had a 17-year-old daughter that got pregnant in that church. And where I wish I could tell you that church wrapped their arms around that family and helped them get through it, you guys are shaking your heads. You sort of know what happened, right? They basically said, Pastor, if you can't take care of your family, we don't want you taking care of this church. And it was a very, very difficult season of time for them. So I I part of that is me befriending Dave, and I now look at that story, and like I said, you can see Cindy sitting back, and she's working here for 3 or 4 years now. I now look at what was tragedy almost, or tragic situation with their family. God has redeemed that and allowed those circumstances and allowed us to share with others. Hey, there's always more going on behind the scenes. Your pastors are people just like the rest of us. They've been anointed and appointed by the Lord to preach and teach the gospel message, but that comes with tremendous challenges. It comes with a lot of hurt, and they're imperfect, right? So Carl, I guess that's a long answer to, you know, I am continually praying that how can we help establish a greater level of not just care, but of transparency so that our pastors and their families can say, hey, we've got problems just like the rest of you. And can we allow our pastors to ask for some personal prayer for their families, for their marriages, without it turning into, the scuttlebutt and the rumor mill? Because unfortunately, several years ago, the lead pastor from my home church took his own life, and terrible, terrible situation. And after that happened, I probably heard 1,000 times of people saying, "Well, I wish we would have known what was happening, because if we'd only known, we could have done, name whatever you want to say, right?" And the reality is, he had a problem with alcohol. That was one of his issues. And the reality is, if he would have come out and said, hey guys, I'm struggling with alcohol, our tendency is not to wrap our arms around and say, hey, let's help get through this. The tendency is, hey, did you hear this was happening? Or did you hear that was going on? And it's not helpful, right? And so just taking those kind of things as a ministry, I want us to be better at it. I want us to be more vocal, to have greater exposure so that we can help people understand it's already hard. Our pastors need encouragement, they need support, they need our prayers. I absolutely believe that prayer is the most powerful tool that we have as a believer, and it's also one of the least utilized tools. So I don't know, there's a host of things. We'll take any and all prayer. We'll take any and all encouragement. And I'm encouraged by seeing you guys smile right here. That's
Yeah.
helpful for us.
So Andy, as we begin to close out, we'll post the link on the video to your website. But if I were to say Indian man, what does that bring to mind?
Say what?
Indian man.
I don't know if it
There's
brings
something on
anything
your
to mind for
chalkboard.
me.
There's something on your chalkboard that says Indian
Oh,
man.
aha. Okay. Well, uh, so that's a toughie. I know exactly what it brings to mind. You should ask me a different one though. Like that's a pretty hard story.
Well, I saw tires.
Yeah. So the tire one, that's one I'm always thinking about, because if you look at our website, we have this big tour bus, and we travel around the country with these encourage your pastor and pray for your pastor tours. There was a guy that had dinner one night with a friend of mine, and uh, how did that go? The I never met this guy before, but the friend of mine was here, and he said, "Hey, do you mind this guy lives near your office? Do you mind if I leave his backpack here, because he left his backpack at this dinner thing?" I said, "It's fine." So he left it right out there in the front of the office. And that guy, who I never met before, comes over to pick up his backpack, and he's asking questions, and he says, "Why do you got this name on here about the tire thing?" And I said, "Well, that's on there because there was a guy that owns this tire shop that gave us a tire one time when our bus had a flat, and those tires are like $1,000 a piece. They're expensive." And I said, "It's funny you bring that up, because we actually need all new tires on it at this point, and so we're actually praying about how it's going to handle it." And he said, "Well, why don't you let me take care of that for you?" I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Well, just let me call you back later tonight. I said, okay. So sure enough, about 8 o'clock that night, this guy calls me and he said, I want you to take it to this particular place, take your bus over there, drop it off. They're going to put all new tires on it, and you just tell them thank you. And this was like almost $10,000 for the tires, right?
Mm.
And so come to find out, this guy was buddies with the guy that owned this whole tire dealership thing. And had it wouldn't be for the fact that we had tire, it was tire at the time. We added the S later on there, but you'd be amazed at how many people come in and they say, "Hey, what's this wall all about?" You know, they want to know something about it, and one thing often has led to another. So I will tell you, if you have any pastors that watch this, I encourage pastors all the time to put up something similar in the foyers of their churches because it's a great way to tell stories and for people to say, you know, a visitor come into your church, say, "Hey, what's this wall about these God things all about?" And it's an opportunity to say, we believe that God's intimately involved with the details of our lives. And when we see those things, we want to celebrate it and we put them on display because, you know, in the old days, the Israelites, they'd see God do extraordinary things. And the very next day, they're complaining about it, right? Very next day.
Well,
So
Andy,
those are kind of our Ebenezer stone. We want to remember the faithfulness of God. We put it on display for other people
yeah.
to see it too.
Well, when I see you Wednesday, you can tell Jamal and I about Indian Man.
I will do that when
Oh,
we're on a less public platform than
yeah,
this.
yeah. So again, you know, we're a 30-minute. Any last questions from you guys? Jack,
Nope,
Carl,
I'm good.
or Andy? We
I'll
really
just make sure we have his website. I think we do
we
in
do,
that
yeah.
bio,
Yeah,
so we can.
I just got it in the email, just and a picture of his chalkboard. That's where I got the words Indian Man
Okay.
from. So I was looking at the picture that was sent to me.
Hey, Herb, if you study it, you'll see the sword and the shield. That was the very first entry. That was 2016.
Oh yeah,
That's right in the
right in
middle.
the center. I see it.
Right in the middle. That was the very first entry. That's what started it all right there.
Yeah, I see something else. It's called billboards.
Billboards, that was a ministry supporter of ours had at the time owned an HVAC company with billboards all around town. And it was one of our concert events at the ballpark down there. I don't know, I ran into him somewhere and he said, "How's it going?" I said, "It's going good." And we said something about promotion. He's like, "Well, if you want," he said, "I can switch out my billboards and put their digital ones, you know." He said, "I can promote your concert on there." And so for the next month, basically, he took all his own advertising down
Yeah.
and put up the advertising for our concert events.
Was there any events coming up that our listeners should know about?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how localized, but one of the I keep pointing at wherever she went, Cindy back there. So Cindy and another lady named Charlotte head up our ministry to pastors' wives, and March is generally recognized as Pastors' Wives Appreciation Month. And so we do three of those events, one here in Winston-Salem, one in Martinsville, Virginia, where our retreat center is, and then one over in Johnson City, Tennessee. And it's just an opportunity there for the women to get together, share stories, encourage each other, and then it's a brunch basically. So there's probably a slider on our website, Herb. You could probably grab that gives all the details on it.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, when you get ready to energize these three men, let us know.
I
Jack
don't know,
and
Carl down
Carl.
here, he's grinning from ear to ear the whole time. So are you guys local in town here or not?
Carl's in Florida. We're trying to get him up here.
Yeah, well, good. Where in Florida, Carl?
Tampa or
Oh,
Brandon.
all right. Well, we were a very small portion of our ministry. We do something called pastor disaster relief. You got a lot of great organizations that help people when there's a widespread disaster, but none of them really focus on churches themselves or specifically pastors. And there's a story behind it, obviously, but I felt like we should offer that. And so we were down there, help to fix up a church in more like St. Petersburg area, I guess, not too
Yeah.
far from where you're at. Back when it was it 2, 3 years ago? Was it no, it wasn't Andrew. What was the storm that came through there? I'm drawing a blank on it
Yeah,
now.
there's been so many, it's hard to tell.
Well, yeah, whatever. It was a big one 2 or 3 years ago. But anyway, that's the last time I've been in your area. It was 2 or 3 years ago, probably.
Well, Andy, on behalf of our team, thank you again. And just want to let you know we have a listening audience in over 30 countries around the world. So they'll be hearing your message spread broad
Well,
and
wherever
wide.
those other countries are, their pastors need encouragement too.
That's
So,
right. That's
Amen.
right. Well, thank you again.
all right. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. Great to see you.